Greetings. My name is Stewart Donaldson, and I am president of the Claremont Flourishing Center at Claremont Graduate University. One of the topics that has become very popular in the field of flourishing science is a topic called positive relational energy. And at the Flourishing Center, we have been conducting studies on this topic. We've recently published three new articles on it. One with the founder of the field of positive organizational scholarship, Professor Kim Cameron. And this article that just came out in the International Journal of Applied Positive Psychology is a new scale that is now validated so that you can measure positively energizing leadership in the workplaces that you work in. Today, Professor Cameron is visiting our positive organizational psychology class at the Claremont Graduate University. And I'm proud to share with you his brief lecture that outlines why this topic is so important and how it has developed over a whole range of empirical studies. Professor Cameron is the co-founder of the Center for Positive Organizations at the University of Michigan and professor emeritus in both business administration and higher education at the University of Michigan. He is recognized as the foremost expert on positive relational energy, which is generated by virtuous actions that can have a profound impact on an organization's success, as well as an individual's professional and personal life. He's published more than 140 academic articles on this topic and related topics, 15 scholarly books, and he's recently been recognized as being among the top 10 scholars in the organizational sciences. His latest book, Positively Energizing Leadership, Virtuous Actions and Relationships That Create High Performance, is the culmination of his research and discoveries over the past couple of decades. So I'm pleased to welcome you to the lecture by Professor Kim Cameron.
Second is there has to be a theory that explains why it works. Again, if you question that, stop me. We'll talk about why. And the third is I either have to have done this or helped an organization do it, so I know there's practical utility. So those three questions, those three criteria, if you have questions about those, please stop me. All right. Last introductory slide. I will have labeled this a successful 45 minutes if you have identified a 1% improvement. 1% is easy. Anybody can do that. But it matters a lot. If you get on an airplane, let's say in Los Angeles, you go around the world, but you're off 1 degree. You end up just south of Seattle or northern Mexico. It does not take much change to put you in a very different place. So 1% can matter a lot. 1% times 15 people, that's a big change, Okay. So here's the introductory slide. It just explains why I've been doing what I've been doing. So think of the line across the top of that slide as representing a deviance continuum. Now, in English, the word deviance has a negative connotation. If I call you a deviant, juvenile delinquent, deviant, normally that's a negative. But you can think of positive deviance. You can also think of negative deviance. Okay, there's several important implications of thinking of deviance on a continuum. One is that all organizations exist to eliminate deviance. By definition, organizing means get rid of aberrant, unexpected, not normal behavior. So most organizations aspire to be in the middle. Another implication is we know a lot more about some of the one end of this continuum than the other. So think, for example, of physical health. On the left-hand side, we call that illness. I got the flu, I got diabetes, I'm not doing well, I'm not feeling well. 90% of medical research focuses on the gap between the left-hand side and the middle. Once I'm normal, once I'm healthy, once I'm absent illness, then essentially medical science stops worrying about me. Psychologically, it's very similar. 90% of psychological research focuses on the gap between the left-hand side and the middle. I mean, stress, schizophrenia, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, overwhelming emotional upset. I mean, we spend a lot of time, a lot of therapists, a lot of research trying to get us from the left-hand side to the middle. Once I'm healthy, well-being is fine, happiness quotient is at my set point, I'm doing fine, thank you. That's essentially where we stop. Of course, on the right-hand side, there is positively deviant physical health. It's the ability to run an Ironman competition, or 15% body fat for women, 5% body fat for men. The ability to do 400 push-ups. I mean, there's a little research on that kind of stuff, not much. Psychologically, Mike Csikszentmihalyi, whom you know well, wrote the Flow book, which essentially describes the condition where people are so immersed in a task they care about, they lose track of time, they lose track of physiological needs. If you put electrodes on your brain, you're using more of your brain capacity than normal. It's not zoning out in front of a screen, it's hyper cognitive activity. Well, a little research on that, not much. Organizations are the same. If my organization's not doing so well, we're not hitting goals, we're losing money, quality is a problem. Boy, we spend a lot of time trying to close that gap. Most organizations spend a majority of their time trying to get to the middle. That is, we're making money, finally captured market share. We're doing ethical things now. We're incremental improvement and so on. We're doing well. On the right-hand side, on the other hand, is positively deviant performance, extraordinary, spectacular, best in the business. I refer to the right-hand side of that as a virtuous condition. Virtuousness means the best of the human condition. The highest aspirations we have for ourselves is a virtuous state. I mean, if the world was virtuous, there would be no poverty, there'd be no war, everybody'd be well educated. I mean, it's the best we can imagine. Well, there's a little bit of research on that, not much. So, for no good reason, I'm referring to the left-hand side as deficit gaps. On the right-hand side, I'm referring to that as abundance gaps. Positive leadership, positive practices focuses on the gap between the middle and the right-hand side. And here's the most important slide. If you focus on abundance gaps, you unleash something called the heliotropic effect. Now, you know what the heliotropic effect is. If you put a plant in the window over time, it will lean toward the light. Every living system has a tendency toward the light and away from dark. Or in other words, it was Einstein who said, light is simply nature's way of distributing life-giving positive energy. So sure enough, life-giving positive energy is what creates life. You put a seed in the ground, it will grow toward the light. And so there are lots of examples of that. Photosynthesis happens only in the presence of light. So life-giving positive energy is at the very core what causes people to flourish. I'm going to give you just 2 or 3 studies of maybe 40 or more that exist. Here's one study. So a physician puts a drop of liquid at the bottom of your nostril in which there's cold virus. They call it rhinovirus. You breathe in the virus. Some people get sick and some people don't. And the question is, well, how do you predict who succumbs to the virus versus who's resilient? Turns out the temperature at the back of your throat, where your esophagus meets the nasal passages, a half a degree difference in that temperature causes you to succumb to the virus versus be resilient, and your emotional state affects the temperature. Happy, optimistic, positive, virtuous people, grateful, compassionate, kind people get sick significantly less often, less than half as often as normal people, not to mention depressed, angry, cynical people. But the classic study that illustrates that is called the Nun Study. It's a study of 678 Catholic nuns living in a convent. Now, this was originally designed as an Alzheimer's disease study, but see, these people have the same diet, same regimen, same environment. You can control for a lot of factors. Well, the one difference they found is that some nuns 60 years before were keeping a journal or a diary saying things like this. This is the culmination of my life's dream. I'm so happy to enter the order. This is such a blessing. Some nuns were saying this is going to be a challenge. It's going to be a sacrifice. It's going to be difficult, but I'm committed. I'm going to follow through. So they put nuns in two groups depending on which type of journal they were keeping 60 years before. I understand. Now, these numbers aren't precise, but they're close. Of the 90 nuns in the first group, 70 were alive. Of the 90 nuns in the second group, 20 were alive. And it turns out every decade there's a significant difference on mortality rates. Those in the first group lived on the average 9 years longer than those in the second group. I think it's 9 years, maybe it's 7 years, but significantly longer. That is positive, actually has a physiological impact on us. In addition to that, let's assume, in fact, let me skip this one and do this one instead. I used to do this in my classes. So let's assume all of you are in my class, and I say, students, in this class, you have to keep a journal, and every day you have to write in your journal something for which you're grateful. But I'm going to make that assignment to only half of you. So half of you keep a gratitude journal. The other half of you simply write down 3 events, 3 interactions, 3 problems you faced. So I've got a journal group. I got a gratitude journal group. That's the difference. Now, I'm going to ask you to expose yourself to several tests. One is I'm going to give all of you a flu shot at the end of the semester. I'm going to test for the number of antibodies in your system. 1 week later, those keeping a gratitude journal will be healthier, will have significantly more antibodies in your system in 1 week than will the other group. I give you a mental acuity task. What's that? You have to memorize information. You have to remember information. You have to come up with some sophisticated decision rules for complex data. Those keeping a gratitude journal will have more mental acuity. I literally can affect your test scores. I'm going to show you in a minute. I give you a creativity task. What's that? Well, you think of all the things you can use a ping pong ball
I'll
for.
be there by next week.
Please. Did somebody have a question? Okay. All right. Well, the creativity task is think of all the things you can use a brick for or a ping pong ball. Those keeping a gratitude journal will have more ideas and a broader variety of ideas. Mental flexibility. Literally, I can affect the way you think. And there's been a bunch of research on that, which you kind of know about. Here's some examples of why this is heliotropic. It affects at the very core. So in this study, this is a study of students. I can't decide how much of this I'm going to share. I'll share this study. So I have 3 teachers in 3 different classes. I say to teacher number 1, in your class, you have a group of students who are incredibly bright, IQ points off the charts, really aggressive. It's going to take a great teacher to handle these students. Can you do it? Sure. Teacher number two, in your class, you've got a real mix. You've got some bright students, some challenged students, lots in between. It's going to take a great teacher to handle real variety or diversity. Can you do it? Sure. Teacher number three, in your class, you've got a group of students who come from difficult backgrounds, struggled a lot, failed, have not done well. It's going to take a great teacher to help these kids flourish. Will you do it? You bet. At the end of the semester, at the end of the year, give all the students a standardized test. And sure enough, I find statistically significant differences. Those in the first group do significantly better. Those in the middle group do about average. Those in the bottom group do significantly worse than the average. I mean, if I label somebody, it's called the heliotropic effect. If I label somebody smart, they sure enough do that. Let me move that slide. Skip those. This is a study done of children ages 3 months. This is a 3-month-old on the left to 8 months, 8-month-old child on the right. Oops. In this study, I simply had to put a child on a caregiver's lap and have that child watch a puppet show for maybe 20 seconds. So a puppet tries to walk across the stage, tries to climb a hill, tries to open a box. Then I have two other puppets. One puppet tries to help, support, encourage. The other puppet tries to hinder, puts a block up. You can't make it up the hill, jumps on a box. You can't open the box. Then after 20 or 30 seconds, I bring the two puppets out, put it in front of the child, and the child selects whichever puppet he or she wants to play with. More than 90% of the time, the child selects the puppet that tries to help rather than tries to hinder. That is, from the time you were 3 months old, long before you learn language, long before you're socialized, there is an inherent tendency toward the positive and away from the negative. And it happens with animals, it happens with human beings, children and adults, and so on. Okay. Here's the evidence of the heliotropic effect. So I have a friend who works in an organization, they study heart rhythms. So the top, that's your heart rhythm when you're in an angry, upset, cynical, frustrated condition. The bottom, that's when you're in a positive, a virtuous, or in this case, a gratitude condition. Same thing happens with compassion and forgiveness and so on. But now you see the heart rhythms are very predictable. It helps explain why, after 60 years, some nuns are alive and some nuns are dead who are keeping a gratitude journal. I mean, your body works better, and you don't control this. You don't say to your heart, change, and it changes. It doesn't change. This is a study of mindset. This can be done in a number of ways. One is meditation practice, but this is easier. This is you simply ask people to think about a positive, optimistic future versus a neutral or negative future. And you simply do a scan of your brain. Those with that positive, optimistic future have more areas of your brain activated. And of those activated, they're activated to a greater extent. You literally are smarter. I'll show you more in a minute. This is a study of coherence. In your body, you've got rhythms, heart rhythms, brain rhythms, muscle twitch rhythms, and so on. The ideal measure of coherence, when everything is perfectly aligned, is 0.1 hertz. So at the top, that's when you're upset and angry. Middle is when you're asleep. Bottom is when you're in an appreciative or gratitude or virtuous condition, positive condition. You are perfect. You can't get better physically than when you're in that virtuous condition. This is a study done of vagal tone, vagus nerve. This is Barbara Fredrickson's and her lab's work. They just induce a positive, virtuous state and measure something called vagal tone. That's the extent to which your heart rhythms, your nervous system rhythms are aligned. And sure enough, over time, significant improvement in long-term wellness. And then the last study is done with heart disease patients, half of whom kept gratitude journals, half of whom did not. At the end of a no, 2 month period of time, there was significant healing in the hearts of those keeping a gratitude journal, and either deterioration or no healing in the other group. All right. So here are just some ways I've seen organizations capitalize on gratitude. I know an organization, the 2,500 employees, every single employee gets a gratitude journal. I know a lot of families where every family member gets a gratitude journal. Or, um, or simply writing a letter or making a visit to people who do especially extraordinary things or just hit the goals. The CEO of LG, the Korean conglomerate, learned about this. Every day he has his secretary put on his desk 5 cards. On one side is printed thank you, on the other side is blank. He writes every single day a five different thank you cards to somebody in his organization. Now that was probably 10 years ago. I saw him a couple of years ago and asked him, "Are you still doing that?" He said, "Absolutely. It's changed everything in my organization because we're so focused on problems. I forced myself out of that into a gratitude condition once a day." Um, communicating with families, it's just a thing I've seen several executives do where, I mean, I could say to Stewart, "Man, you're so spectacular. You're doing such a great job in your classrooms. People are so affected by you." I can also write a letter to Stewart's family in which I said, "Man, you got to be so proud of your husband, your father, your son. He is extraordinary. You just don't know how many lives he's changed. You just need to be really proud of him because we are." So he not only hears it from me, now he hears it from the most important people in his life, and so on. All right. Gratitude walls. We have a gratitude wall in our research center. We put up a gratitude wall anytime we have a conference, which is simply writing gratitude. Anyway, lots of stories about that. Let me give you 20 seconds. Is there anything that you've heard on that list that you say to yourself, "You know what, I could do that"? Okay. If you're significantly overweight, the probability of dying early is 20%. If you're an excessive drinker, probability of dying early is 30%. Now, all the students at Michigan want to know what excessive means. If you're a smoker, 50% probability you'll die early. If you're in poor social relationships, the probability of dying early is 70%. Social relationships are by far the biggest predictor of longevity, of success in life, of family satisfaction and success, of promotions, of awards won, and so on. The largest study I know that in existence, there's a biology study longer, but the longest social science study started in 1938, concluded that by far, more than any other factor, the thing that predicts virtually every successful outcome in life is the quality of your relationships with other people. Well, why is that? The normal answer is, well, look, nice to feel loved and have my needs met. And Gallup runs around the world asking if people are engaged and feeling engaged. And that's really a big predictor of outcomes. And it is. I mean, I'm getting my needs met, except it's not the number one factor. Here's the number one factor. This study's done at my university where a colleague in the psychology department took entering freshmen, asked them to identify their goals for the year. Some were, well, she categorized the goals into 2 types. One type were called achievement goals. I want to get good grades. I want to be popular. I want a girlfriend. The other kind was called contribution goals. I want to make a difference. I want to have something get better because what I've done. She put people in 2 groups depending on which type of goal was dominant. Then she simply followed them for one academic year, measuring things like how well they got along with the roommates, how many times they got elected to a club office, social factors, Physical factors, how many minor physiological symptoms? They got the cramps, they got flu, they got COVID, they missed class. The other was cognitive, academic factors, what the grade point average was, what their test scores were on every single dimension. Contribution goals were more predictive of success than achievement goals. Contribution goals were the major predictor of why people flourished in relationships. As confirmed by a kidney dialysis study, these people in this study, not very sophisticated study, they simply measured the extent to which people were being loved, supported, and cared for by somebody, and the extent to which they were making a difference in somebody else's life, supporting, caring for them. The second factor was far more predictive of health recovery than the first factor. And that's confirmed by a study of multiple sclerosis patients, MS patients. This was more carefully designed. In this study, half of these people were assigned to receive a phone call once a week from somebody expressing love, support, and concern. The other half of these people were assigned to place a phone call to somebody else expressing love, support, and concern to them. 2 years later, they simply measured well-being, self-efficacy, confidence, competence, physical activity, hope, and depression. 8-fold difference. Those people who placed the phone call were 8 times healthier than those people who received a phone call. Now, there's lots of ways in which you can capitalize on contribution. I know a lot of organizations that when people do well, they give them a chance to mentor or coach somebody else. Your reward for doing so well is you get a chance to teach or help. And a whole bunch of others. Let me not take time. But contribution ends up being a very powerful predictor of positive outcomes. All right, let me stop there. Here's the one I wanted to show you earlier. This is a study done where this was the world's largest university consortium. They own universities, none in the US, but in Central and South America, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, Middle East, Africa, and so on. In this study, we simply asked people in 14 different disciplines, ranging literally from physics and math to social sciences. We simply exposed them for a day-long workshop on positive practices, asked them to teach the same course that they taught last year, only this time expose students to positivity, positive leadership, positive practices. Well, 3 classes in an India university. Student satisfaction goes up a full point. Grade point average goes almost 10 points. Student attendance goes up 10%. And in Spanish universities, these are different disciplines, 4 different disciplines. Grade point average goes up. I mean, people do better. As it turns out, positivity affects the way people perform. Now you say, okay, fine, Cameron, but I got the heart rhythms, I got the brain rhythms. Okay, I understand that. But wait, I'm running an organization. That's a whole lot more complex than simply trying to affect somebody's mood or the way they're feeling about themselves. So for 25 years, we've been doing research on impact on organizations, stuff people are held accountable for. The overall conclusion, and so far, no disconfirming evidence, has never been a failure. If you implement positive abundance culture, virtuousness, you make more money. I'll show you if we have enough time. Productivity, more output, quality, fewer errors, waste, innovation, more entrepreneurship, customer satisfaction, customer loyalty, and employee retention, employee satisfaction, engagement. Those are the outcomes when you implement positive practices. This is a study of 30 organizations, all in healthcare. These are healthcare organizations, some hospitals, but other, clinics. We simply exposed this, senior execs, the people who are running these places, to positive practices. And then we said, we need causal relationships. So we would like to have you show us the scores. We're going to measure you periodically over 2 years. And we want you to show us the scores of your outcomes, the things you care most about. And there are 9 of those in healthcare organizations. Well, as it turns out, that's the result you see on the slide. The most important part of this slide is that the average for the industry is 3%. We're getting 10 times industry average in improvements. This is a study of financial services. The reason we did this is because financial service organizations have one goal: show me the money. I mean, I'm in business to make money, for Pete's sake. So sure enough, we asked them to identify the way they measured that, and there were 6 different ways these 40 organizations measured financial performance. And we measured some other things too, but we tracked their extent to which they were implementing positive practices, and we tracked over a 2-year period of time financial performance. Now that vertical arrow, the statistical notation is called R squared, and the interpretation is the amount of variance accounted for. Those of you in the Ph.D. program know this well. Turns out we can account for 45% of financial performance only not knowing the size, not knowing the industry, not knowing anything, except are you implementing positive practices? I mean, do you know anything that predicts Wall Street by 45%, for heaven's sake? I mean, it's an enormously strong. People say, no, it can't be true. Maybe not, but it sure did work in this one. And let me give you one example. I'm going to give you one practical example. Prudential Financial. The CEO came to us and said, come help us. We're going to merge. We're going to merge with Cigna Financial. There were bitter enemies. It's like merging the Yankees and the Red Sox. I mean, we're not sure it can pull this off, but we have to do it. So they did. The CEO of Cigna became the CEO of the merged organization. His name is John Kim. Here's what he said. John said, look, implementing positive leadership practices was initially seen as just being positive, smiles. It became clear, however, this was a significant change. There's no end, no final grade. This is about changing our culture, our strategy, and our approach. It's not a destination or a conclusion, but a process. And then here's what's interesting. I'll know that we've succeeded when customers and employees see us as above average in all the technical aspects of our business, but then by succeeding above all understanding. How's that for an aspiration? We're so good, nobody can understand how we got there. And then this last, we don't debate about how we get there, we just take initiative. If I wanted to stop this movement, I couldn't. It's well beyond my control. People are doing things now that are self-perpetuating. And sure enough, they were. He was attracted away 5 years later to run the world's largest mutual insurance company. And his successor, who almost always has an agenda of him or herself, of her own, out with the old, in with the new. In this case, nothing changed. The new CEO just got in lockstep because it was not a top-down. I mean, John said, well beyond my control. 20% annual growth rate, that's 5 times industry average. They kept 95% of their clients, which was dumbfounding to people, and so on. In other words, there's story after story after story. Here's another one, which I'm not going to take time to tell you. Story after story that confirm that, sure enough, implementing positive practices gets you hard numbers. I mean, outcomes that people say, I'm held accountable for this. Good, because you're going to get outcomes that you care about. Now, there are lots of practices. This slide simply says there are probably 40 or 50 different practices that we've helped organizations implement or that they know about, or there's a research basis. And there's some there are books that you can get, and I'm happy to get them for you. I don't sell books, but happy if you want resources. But let me show you one more thing, just one more thing. We often say positive leadership is the thing that really we care about, and it accounts for a lot of the variance, which is true. I mean, if we have a strategy in place, good culture, processes are well oiled, incentive systems are in place, but we got an absolute idiot for a leader, probably not going to work. In other words, leaders are the single most important factor in accounting for outcomes. It's not the only factor, but you have an absolute idiot at the top, it's not going to work. Almost always. Well, who then are the leaders? Who do we need to make sure get converted to this? Normally, it's the folks in the top boxes. I mean, when we draw pictures of organizations, it's normally some kind of organization chart. And we say, all right, those are the leaders. There's an alternative. An alternative is to draw network maps. I mean, you know what a network map is in the back of an airline magazine. Excuse me. Some cities at the hub, some on the periphery. Well, you can do that with organizations, except people, rather than cities, become the nodes. And the question is, well, how do you connect people together in a network map? Well, there's several options. One is information. Who gives information to whom? Who gets information from whom? And the research is very clear. There's a whole subfield in sociology. The research is clear. If you are at the hub or center of an information network, your performance is higher than the norm, as is the unit you manage. No surprise. You know all the organization secrets. You know all the information that comes through you. You can decide what to share. You have an advantage. You're going to do better. Another alternative is influence. I don't know for sure, but 90% of the leadership literature, I would guess, equates influence and leadership. If you're influential, that means you're a leader. Okay with me. Doesn't matter. And as you'd expect, if you're at the hub of an influence network, you have an advantage. You're going to do better than the norm. There's an alternative. Has to do with energy. Who energizes whom? Who is energized by whom? Now, what does that mean? Who uplifts, elevates, who brightens up the room, who helps other people flourish? It's called being resourceful, for example, having a capacity of resourcefulness. Well, let me show you why that's crucial. Excuse me. First, there are several kinds of energy. One's physical energy, which when I use it, it diminishes. If I run a marathon, I can't do it again. Emotional energy, again, when I use it, it diminishes. Mental energy, we all know about that. I get exhausted. The only kind of energy that elevates with use is called relational energy. It's the kind of energy that's passed between two people in an interaction. Am I left elevated, excited, and energized, or exhausted and depleted? Okay. Here's a conclusion of a whole bunch of studies, which I'm going to skip. But they're important bullets. Top bullet. People who positively energize others are higher performers. No surprise. Here's the surprise. Your position in the energy network is 4 times more important in predicting performance than your position in the information network or the influence network. In other words, energy trumps information and influence by a factor of 4. And the question is, do organizations ever manage energy? Does anybody ever get rewarded or recognized or hired or promoted for being a positive energizer? Because normally we don't even know it exists. And we certainly don't manage it in most organizations. So that's why some of this research has had such impact, is that people don't even know that's a resource that they can manage. Second bullet. If Stewart is a positive energizer and I just get around him, my performance goes up. That is, positive energizers affect the performance of those around them. And that's easy to see why. Communication is much more rich and much more frequent, and resources are gathered more, and so on. A lot of reasons for that. Last bullet. The highest performing organizations have 3 times more positive energizers than normal organizations. That is, anybody can be one. And positive energy, as it turns out, is a set of behaviors. It's not personality. Sometimes people say it's just extroverts. No. It's not extroversion and introversion. I mean, there's sometimes extroverts just drive us crazy. They jump in, they try to control, and so on. So positive energy is not extroversion. It's simply behaviors. And as it turns out, it's virtuous behaviors, helping other people flourish. without expecting a return. Okay. Here is the results of a study, and this is the second to last slide. A study of 600 positive energizers, and this simply shows the top 15 attributes that they measured. Number one is no more important than number 15. They're just all the same. But you get a sense of who energizers are. They help other people flourish without expecting a payback. They see opportunities. They trust and are trustworthy. They help other people feel like they're meeting their goals and being successful. They tend to know people as opposed to just positions or titles. They share plum assignments. They gather other positive energizers around them. They don't compete with others. They gather others and so on. All right. Here's a summary definition of positive energy or positive energizing. So if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, become more, you're a positively energizing leader. That is, other people flourish. All right. Now, let me stop, but I'm happy to answer these questions that Stewart sent, if you'd like. In fact, let me take a crack at a couple of them right off the bat. Number one, in your view, what conditions can leaders nurture to help virtuousness take root in an organization? And that's partly the reason I took time to share with you the positively energizing leadership data, is that simply energizing other people almost guarantees that the organization will do better. And positively energizing leadership is highly dependent on expressing gratitude and humility and helping other people get what they want and so on. No surprise. But that kind of leads me to number two. How to apply positive organization psychology in settings where there are power dynamics? Well, it's a really important question. One of them is that I've found helpful is simply assigning 1% improvements. Nobody's going to resist 1% improvements. You're not threatening any power dynamics at all with having us pick 1% and start doing better. But let me give you another quick option. We've done this now in multiple organizations. So in one organization, it was the world's largest world's largest university consortium. The presidents and chancellors came together. We had several-day retreat. We asked them to identify the positively energizing people in their organizations, positive energizers. We defined that for them. Ended up identifying 46 people worldwide. We brought those 46 people together and we gave them an assignment. The assignment was, you have to infect 90% of the people in your unit, your area, and you have to do with positive practices, positive virtue, positive culture, and you have to do it in 90 days, a 90 in 90 challenge. First question, what does infect mean? Infect means that people can describe what a positive organization is, what positive leadership is, what virtuous practices are, and they've attempted a 1% improvement themselves. That's what infect means. You can teach it, and you've tried it yourself. 90 days later, now we're talking about 135,000 people. 96% of those people had been infected with positive practices, positive leadership, and had attempted 1% improvements. I mean, when's the last time you saw 135,000 people infected with anything except maybe COVID? That is, you simply take it off the back of the folks at the top. It's not a top-down driven program anymore. It's like John Kim said, well beyond my control, and it just sticks. So that's one suggestion. How can leaders balance fostering strong supportive team culture with professional boundaries? Well, again, I don't have to disrupt anybody and their networks or boundaries or ethnicity or gender or I mean nothing, none of that even matters or specialization in an organization. None of that matters when I'm working on positive energy. Best example of that, for example, is the University, I have to mention this, University of Michigan basketball team who are national champions as of this week. And one of the most interesting things is the person who was named the player of the tournament as the final four and then the championship game. Kudu was his name, but anyway, when he was awarded that award and they put a microphone in front of him, he first statement out of his mouth said, "Nobody in our team cares about statistics. We just play together." That's the sort of culture that was created in this basketball team. So positive matters is the whole point. Now I've pounded on that, and I'm going to stop talking because Stewart needs me to stop talking. I'll stop this too. We can talk about that. We can certainly talk about the questions some more.
Thank you so much. And you've got so much good research in such a small period of time. Thanks for really filling in a lot of the empirical gaps in what we've been studying. So we do have time for a few questions. If you'd like to ask one, please raise your hand now.
By the way, thanks for enduring. I mean, holy cow, sitting watching a screen with no action and no movement, boring slides. You're incredible. You deserve either a Ph.D. or a master's degree as a result of having endured this.
Okay, Brady.
Well, first off, thanks for being here, Dr. Cameron. I'm a really big fan of your work, so it means a lot to me to hear you talk about it personally. One question I've stumbled upon, or I guess I'll say I've struggled with in working with organizations, is they want to know how to measure kind of like perma for the organization, not perma within the individuals at the organization, but it's like a multiple index of like, okay, can we not just determine that we're financially thriving, but can we determine that we're like financially thriving, that our employees are happy, that we're having positive community impact? In your work with trying to help organizations understand, the power of positive practices, have you found any way to kind of measure organizational outcomes on a multi-dimensional scale like that, or does that exist, or do you know of one?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I've developed an instrument, actually two instruments. One of them is called PEL, positive energizing leadership. So there's that measure. It's in fact, I think Christina was a doctoral student at Claremont. She graduated a year or two ago, and she's doing research on that instrument. There's also organization practices. What I've always done, however, what I've always done is use those as predictors of hard number outcomes. Or in other words, what are you held accountable for? What do you care about? I mean, if we have engagement scores that are really high, but we're losing money, Well, that's nice. I'm glad people are happy and I'm glad people are flourishing individually, but we could be out of business next year unless we also have the outcomes. So what I've been measuring in terms of outcomes is stuff that almost always people say, here's what we're held accountable for. Here's what's going to keep us in business. And that often and includes not only the predictors, that is the well-being of employees, the engagement scores and so on, but it involves stock price, you know. That's Brady, that probably wasn't even close to what you asked.
No, I mean you actually summarized kind of what I've seen before as well, which is like, it's like we're going to focus on stock price or maybe market capture or whatever. And I think the answer that you were getting at was that it's important to combine the two. It's like measure the predictive variables like employee well-being or positive energy within leadership, but put that side by side with, like you said, what the company's accountable for, and then you kind of get that rainbow of measurement. Maybe
Yeah,
I'll use that metaphor.
exactly. I mean, U.S. Army generals are one example who essentially say, well, I want happy troops, but hey, listen, if that's all I've got, we're in big trouble. I've got to have measures of serious outcomes, you know. Thank you for
Yeah,
that
thank
question.
you,
Great
bro. Yeah.
question.
Teresa.
Thank you so much. This was just amazing. I did have a question, maybe if more about the students and the teachers, just so that I could look up that paper and see the study design and learn more about the students. Because it was just fascinating. Thank you.
I'm not sure, Teresa, I understand your question.
About the three sets of students with the teachers who said, hey, are you up for the
Oh,
task?
oh,
These are
oh,
super smart
mm,
students, or these are super
yeah,
challenging students. And so I'm just interested in the study design because,
yeah,
you know,
thank you. I don't have that right in front of me. I don't have that reference, but I will get it for you. And you can either send me an email. I'm happy to respond to that, or I'll send it to Stewart and he can pass it along to you. But I'll get you the reference to that study. And by the way, there's more than one. There's actually this whole set of information studies, university-led studies that have been done using children in school and the impact. I mean, there have been some really quite clever studies showing the inclination of young human beings toward positive. When given a choice, they choose the positive, and they respond to it. Now, one other thing I ought to say. Roy Baumeister, whom I suspect you know, wrote a book, wrote a article, probably published 10 years ago now, maybe not quite. He did a survey of the psychological literature, and the conclusion of the study was captured by the title of the article. The title was "Bad is Stronger Than Good," which is true. I mean, lose $100 versus get $100 gift in the mail. One will cause a lot more reaction than the other. Have somebody whack you on the side of the head and say, "Oh, sorry, but you're a really nice person." Well, bad is stronger than good. However, that explains what happens emotionally to people. It doesn't explain what happens behaviorally to people. That is, and I skipped this study. If I show you, if I film you bowling, I show half of you bowling when you were making strikes, half of you, I show you film when you were not making strikes. And then a month later, we go down and bowl three more games. Those watching themselves make strikes are going to do better a month later than those not. That is, good is stronger than bad, behaviorally speaking. So part of what I'm attempting to do, especially with young children, is show them the right way rather than make sure they avoid all the wrong ways. That's easy. So many of these studies that we show or that I've looked at, which I like a lot, have to do with, how are children doing? Then the question is, yeah, but how about the people who are teaching them? And sure enough, people respond. If I label you really, really smart, and by the way, I do, Claremont's a famous place for smart people. It's different than if I say, podunk you.
All right. Well, that's a great one to end on. This is the place for smart people. And amazing guest speakers come here and make you smart, like Professor Kim Cameron. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stewart. Thanks for the opportunity. This has been a real highlight for me, and I appreciate very much. Thank you.
Okay, be well. Hope to talk to you soon.